welcome back. Today we're talking about Insecure Season 5, Episode 3, Pressure Okay? And the pressure is on. So this episode takes place 1 year after Lawrence and Issa broke up. And I have to say, I was impressed. First, I was impressed by the addition of Keke Palmer. A lot of her commentary was spot on, and it was exactly what we were all thinking. I also really enjoyed the fact that we couldn't side with either one. Like, there are times I felt bad for Condola, and there are times I felt bad for Lawrence, to be quite honest. And that speaks to some solid writing. So the episode starts off, and at first you're thinking, Lawrence's life post-Issa seems great. He has a new job. He's fulfilled his potential, right? Like, this was a guy working at Best Buy, and now he's living his dream, right? His apartment is great. He's going on dates. And at first you're like, there's no baby in sight, so you're like, oh, everything seems fine. And the way they kind of kick off this episode and introduce Condola and Lawrence's relationship was really brilliant, because he's on a date and then he gets the notification that his child is being brought into this world. And it just set off a whole bunch of red flags. First, it's clear that him and Condola basically have no relationship. So this past year, they're not talking, they're barely cordial. They're kind of walking on eggshells, and you see that as soon as he walks in. They look at him like he is a deadbeat father, like he has no soul. And I was looking at him too. I'm like, what did this guy do over this past year that you're asking him, oh, you're here, right? Like, they're looking at him like, oh, what a pleasant surprise. So glad you could make it for your child's birth. And his reaction kind of settled me, because he was like, of course I'm here. Because I was thinking, why wouldn't he be here? And so throughout the episode, they are just they get to their breaking point, right? There's no communication. He's not involved in finalizing the child's name. It seems like Condola's family is largely responsible for taking care of the child, and Lawrence's family is in the background. They're not really involved in anything. In terms of the health and welfare of not just the child, but Condola, Lawrence is in the dark, right? He basically has to force himself into doctor's appointments. He's the one asking questions because he's not really getting answers. So they are just there's so much tension between the two of them. And I couldn't tell if Condola's sort of frustration with Lawrence was because she's a new mother or because she's not with the father of her child. And the first the way they illustrate the differences in their mindset is through this party. So they get invited to Tiffany's daughter's party, and it's at this party, you notice how totally different their perspectives are in terms of where they see this relationship going. So first, it seems like Lawrence has not seen his child, or it seems like Lawrence has not kept in contact with Kelly or Issa or anybody from the gang. So this was good to know. So it seems Lawrence is just kind of flying back and forth just to see his child, but he's not actually kind of communicating with anyone outside of, Condola, the family, and his friends. So he's really kind of on a tight schedule. The other thing I noticed is that Condola seems very concerned with, again, they look like a family, right? When they're kind of doing these events like the baptism, the birthday party, they show up as a family. And this really speaks to Lawrence because, at face value, everything seems fine. But as you're watching the episode, you realize their lives are kind of falling apart here. And one of the best sort of sequences in this episode was when they had the split screen, and you see Lawrence's life and you see Condola's life, and Lawrence is just kicking it, right? He's popping champagne, he's having a great time at work, he's having a healthy sex life, he's building cribs. He's very idealistic, right? Because he's not the one dealing with the in and out of the realities of having a baby. Whereas Condola's day is crying, her sister is the one helping her. It doesn't seem like she's working, right? Her whole life is kind of taking care of the child. She's dealing with baby body. So she's definitely not having sex with anyone anytime soon. She's not going to be dating anytime soon. So just watching them go through their days, I really felt for Condola, to be honest. She was doing her best, and it's a very stressful time, especially when the person you're with is not really around you. And, again, there's that balance between she's a new mom, but at the same time, she feels she's not getting the full support that she could be getting. And then when I look at Lawrence, if you notice throughout this episode, Lawrence is very administrative throughout. Like, he keeps talking about doctor's appointments. Can we do this? Can we reschedule? Can we do this? Like, everything is very admin for him, and very like he's very concerned with being a good father and kind of showing up when he's supposed to. Whereas Condola, I think, is of a different mindset, right? She's in that mindset where she's thinking about, she's thinking about a lot of things, right? So a lot of Lawrence's questions I can see trigger her, because it's like, sir, this girl, like, she's barely getting through her days, and he just has a checklist, right? And it kind of makes sense when it gets to this breaking point. And there were, like, this build-up was really brilliant, because there's just a few things to kind of note. First, the breaking point happens when Lawrence is about to take the child for a period of time. And I could understand Condola's sort of frustrations, because first, she's a new mom, and second, having your child away from you for a minute, let alone a week, that's a stretch. Especially when you're kind of giving your child over to a man that you're not with, and you don't really, you got hard feelings for. But at that point, like, she gets frustrated with him, and she says, you can't take the baby. And her reasons for that was that she doesn't trust Lawrence anymore. And I wonder if her lack of trust, like, there is a part of me that, like, as I was watching Lawrence and Condola, like, I think maybe Condola thought by having the baby, this would bring Lawrence back in, because she kind of comments on his job and how he left, and how, like, he left her stranded and he's not there on call, like, he can't be there for emergencies. But girl, at the same time, like, you had a baby knowing that this man, like, he already had the job booked, and you weren't together. So I do think there was that part of Condola that still loves him and still thought in part that they could be a family again. Whereas Lawrence's mindset, this episode, I could see, like, him and Condola are over. Like, as far as he's concerned, the relationship is over, and his main concern is to be a father, right? At one point he said, you know what? You blew up my life, and now you're trying to, like, take my child. And I thought this was quite petty, right? Because Lawrence has a way of outsourcing responsibility. It's like, dude, you're a grown man. And a lot of his excuses, like work or this and that, like, they're not really substantive enough. So the way he talked to her was a bit, you're like, sir, you're a grown adult, take responsibility for the decision you made, because he was trying to put it on her quite a bit. But the thing that kind of indicated to me that he was never going to be romantically involved with Condola again was when he said, I'm going to take legal, essentially he implied that he would take legal action to take his child, like, one way or another, like, I'm stepping in. And this, I think, triggered Condola to kind of come to the negotiating table, call him, and, like, they have to figure out a compromise, right? And, watching this episode, like, there was a lot that was unsaid that, like, you could read into, right? So after their fight, he gets on a plane and he heads back to, he heads back home, and there's a full moon. And this theme of a full moon is interesting, because I think he's thinking of Issa. Because if you recall from the last episode, she was kind of looking up at a full moon before she called Nathan. So I think there is that part of him that kind of regrets not having a child with Issa, right? Because he says at one point, like, this is not how I imagined it. This is not. So his whole vibe is like, I'm trying to make the most of it. So overall, I thought this episode was fantastic. You guys, you can add to it, but it was necessary. And I really appreciated the fact that you couldn't really side with either one of them. Like, again, I felt for Condola because she's kind of going through it. But I also felt for Lawrence because he didn't deserve to be disrespected, the way that he was at times. So, it's very complicated. It's difficult to make somebody all good or all bad, right? Like, good people do bad things sometimes. So overall, I thought it was great. You guys let me know what you think, and until next time.